Iran says it is in the final stages of an agreement with its neighbor Oman on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. That is according to the BBC. An Iranian official told MS Now the deal would not include any fees or tolls and would be a temporary agreement to get back to the negotiations that started during the ceasefire earlier this summer. That is good news. That official says the deal is expected to be announced very soon and that the U.S. would be involved in the announcement. Our panel is back with us. All right, Peter. That seems like this deal is more of a first step than an end of the crisis, but it definitely sounds like a positive.
Well, I mean, we don't know how involved the American side has been up till now. It's just something that they would go along with. This has been a negotiation between Iran and Oman, both of which have an interest that's different than, say, President Trump's interest. But it does sound like it's possible that this gets us back to where we were about 4 or 5 weeks ago. But that was only a place where we stopped the fighting in order to have further talks. So we'll see. I mean, there have been any number of days when we've heard that a deal is imminent, a deal is about to be made, a deal will be made by tomorrow, a deal will be made by the end of the week. So we should take all this with a considerable grain of salt. But I think that obviously at the moment, without large numbers of bombs and missiles being flung at each other, they do seem to be trying to head towards some sort of more of a diplomatic resolution to this.
So then, Kevin, if to Peter's point, at best, we could potentially get back to where we were 4 or 5 weeks ago, not even 4 or 5 months ago. What is this like for all of these House members who are already in their home districts? Senators are going to be joining them this weekend. How frustrated, how difficult is it for Republicans who have to answer questions about this war?
I mean, this just complicates things for them. Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I have found talking to Republicans, though, is that at least publicly, they are not willing to cross the president on this when it comes to, among other things, the idea of gas prices going up or the idea of trying to put some guardrails around this conflict, be it through a declaration of war or a war powers resolution in Congress. We have seen those advance, of course, but by slim margins with only a handful of Republicans joining in either chamber. And so this is kind of this weird, complicated path that they're going to have to now weave, where they want to, obviously, and they feel compelled, even though his polling is in the 30s, they feel compelled to stand by the president. They feel compelled to make the argument, as they have for months now, that this was a necessary step to be taken because Iran has been a threat for years upon years. But at the same time, navigate the consequences of what this war has wrought. And even if we go back a few weeks, that still leaves the instability, and that leaves numerous questions about whether or not we could see another spike in the conflict in the lead up to the war, or lead up to Election Day. And obviously, we know what has just happened in the last few weeks, which has only, frustrated Republicans more, as they, at least behind the scenes, are trying to figure out, okay, how do we explain this to voters back home? Like I said in the last segment, they want to be talking about the tax cuts. They don't want to be talking about, okay, now how do you explain the gas prices? I was in Virginia, one last point, I was in Virginia just earlier this week talking to a Republican voter and who said that he's a diehard Republican, loves Trump. And I was like, well, is there anything that he, has done that you would like him to do differently? And he was like, I wish he would get the gas prices fixed. So,
and
that's
by the way, great. You want to talk about the tax cuts? Super. Those voters are going to say that money is poof, gone, finished, finito. I needed it so I could get groceries, buy back to school clothes and put gas in the car. Dave, take us to the campaign trail. What are you hearing from both sides, both campaigns and voters about this war? Because I would love to know, who are the enthusiasts? Who are those who are saying we are doing the right thing?
From Republicans and Republican voters, you hear very little about it. You're seeing this in South Carolina, where there's a very quick election to replace Lindsey Graham, probably the biggest advocate for the war in the Congress. And the candidates for that have tried to end the conversation as soon as possible by saying, well, it's a 47-year conflict and we're glad he did it. And can we talk about affordability? Can we talk about men and women's sports, et cetera? Among Democrats, top of mind, it's actually a thing Democrats often pivot to when you're talking to the candidates. Voters, a thing that is on their minds, too. And you're starting to, in the conversation I had with voters, an annoyance that this is happening, that this is causing chaos, that instability in prices. and they're not hearing much about it because the president wants to talk about other issues. But among Democrats, this is, I wouldn't even say they're defecting or pivoting when they're talking about something else. They bring everything back to the fact that prices are up because the president started this war, and there is no popular support for this war in any swing seat that I've been to. The White House is not selling this. Democrats are selling how it was a bad idea. That's as much as you hear about it.
Let's just repeat that and frame it. Let's not talk about the war. Let's pivot to something more important: men and women's sports. This is where some of our lawmakers are right now. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me this morning. That's bananas.